Hello, hello, I'm Alicia.
And I'm Raven.
And today we're gonna do the fourth video in the fourth installation of the Fatphobia and Racism video. The original video was out on the 1st of July. On the 1st of August we're gonna have the second one.
Have you seen this unicorn?
But for the time being, we're gonna talk about the third part that we wanted to sort of analyze together. And the point here where we have seen the general Italian perspective on fatness on the first commentary video. On the second one, we have seen the perspective of someone who was holding at the very least fatphobic views, which was Raven's video. And today we're gonna go through a few media examples where there have been fat people depictions. How authentic are they and how appropriate are they? Do they actually tell us anything about the real experience of fat people?
Or do they perhaps reveal the opinions of the writers themselves?
Exactly. That's how we see fat people without necessarily having a first experience. Well, we have sort of reduced it down to 4 shows and 4 episodes out of these shows.
Which are kind of 4 shows that we've been watching in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
At least.
The first one is Dietland. Then we're gonna dip into Shrill. Then we're gonna see a bit of Euphoria. And then we're gonna end, peculiarly I know, with BoJack Horseman. The first point, I think, we started yesterday rewatching Dietland.
Yeah. Because me watching Dietland, that was the one I thought that was truest to my experience of seeing sort of how people treat you. That's one that seems to be the most accurate in, like, this is just a show about what it's like to be a fat person. And especially, in interactions with society, the way the boss was treating the main character. Those all felt quite accurate without necessarily making a commentary on it as such.
The thing about especially the boss and how the boss treats Kitty, treats Plum, the issue there is that Kitty is the finest example of white performative feminism, where her point is not necessarily to defend or understand even other positions than her, which is a white woman in power, still, subject to misogynistic views that we've seen, but her point is always, how can I be more on top of things? And she reveals that in the way that she discards and dismissed and openly says how bad it is. I don't want to encourage my girls to be fat.
Yeah, and she mentions, she says that I acknowledge that some of them have a weight problem. And it's just that immediately, like, that's, everything that she thinks about fat people, and that it's always a problem. Yeah. They have a problem, or they are a problem. So, in this particular episode, like, the reason why we chose this episode is because it's an odd one in kind of what it's trying to say, but also what it says about Plum, the main character. So, like, so she's at this point she's joined part of, what is this group? The Calliope House?
The Calliope House. I think the point is Verena, the head of the thing, is the daughter of the 2 creators of the Baptist Method diet, and so she's trying to sort of undo and give back the damage that her parents did, which by the end of the season I think it's debatable even her good intentions, but
but then the point of this episode is to get Plum to go through a bunch of beauty treatments to show how she can be bangable as a fat person.
I think the main issue that I have with this rewatching it, and after I've rewatched it now after I read the Italian book Bella di Faccia, and one of the chapters that they had there, and I was really grateful for because I saw no other book, even feminist book, ever mention that, is that it's always a progression into learning to love yourself, which is the issue of how all these positivity movements are co-opted, and in the end the responsibility is still of the singular individual. It's never, like, we never address the fact that society is in the way that treats diversity of any kind, and you cannot, it's very painful to see how they make her try to conform to the standard of beauty. They bring it to the makeup artist, and the makeup artist is like, oh, let's contour you so your face looks slimmer, and all those kind of tricks. And you know what? It's worth every penny when she has to spend like £1,000 still, well, dollars in makeup. And even Verena at the end with her mother, she manages to convince her mother that she's doing the right for her, And her point is always, oh no, you have to, yes, society is shit, but it's up to you. It's down to you. You have to learn to love yourself. And I'm just like, you are part of the problem, because it's not up to us to love our bodies. That is not the solution. The solution is do actions that change society, because it's very unfair and sort of a ulterior punching down on fat people, asking them to love yourself anyway, despite the fact that society to this day, every day, will use your body against you. And it's a weapon that society uses against you, but you have to love yourself. Despite the fact that I send you to dates with people that have not been prepared or not even been told that you're fat and will leave you at the table. And all of this happens, but it's your fault if you don't love yourself.
And there's an interesting thing that they reveal that immediately, which is when, like, after she spends her day going through all these beauty treatments, she goes to the office to see Kitty, and the first thing Kitty says is this why I can't get hold of you? Because you're clamming yourself up. And just strip all that work to do all that, and Kitty just peels it away in one sentence. Because that's the point. Like, being able to do that and being able to feel confident and be able to express that isn't going to stop someone from trying to remove that power from you.
Exactly. I guess if I had known where then the series was going down with Calliope House and Verena, I would have been able to call her out earlier. I think something that is very realistic, it's how insidious is the idea and how it's portrayed, that, oh, but these people are doing it just for your own good, because you have to change your perspective to then change humanity's perspective. But down to the practical point, it's always about Plum dealing with herself without dealing with any of the issues, without dealing with any of... They never care about learning why is the red dress so important.
Yeah.
Why is looking that way so important? They just tell it's wrong, you need to change, you need to love yourself, despite how regularly society treats you. And that also goes to the performative sort of feminism that Verena does as well, in a different way from Kitty, but it's exactly the same thing.
And it's more powerful than that as well, because like in one of the very first scenes you have is Plum going to like her group Waist Watchers, and like this other fat woman walks in who honestly seems quite similar to you in style and eccentricity and the confidence that she exuded, and like she's honest about the fact that like I'm totally fine with who I am. I'm worried about like any health issues that might come up. But that's the thing, is like if she genuinely doesn't care, then that is great.
Yeah.
But you know, that's where she is, and you can't expect other people to force themselves to get to that point. If it hurts when someone makes a bad comment about it, it's going to hurt.
I am still wondering to this day, like the scene, which I think is a few episodes later, when Plum herself finally changes her style, goes to the cafe where her friend is, and she's so empowered. You know what? I'm not ordering a salad today. I'm ordering a milkshake and fries. And her friend tries to like make her notice. Oh, I appreciate that he doesn't do it in the best of ways, and maybe the way that they wanted to portray it was in concern trolling. But I don't believe that a dear friend that you've had for years is there saying that, and seems concerned about, oh, because you have accepted and you have done this sort of your own kind of glam up and you're eating what you want, have you given up on your health?
Yeah.
And I genuinely believe that the way that they wanted to do it was in concern trolling, because of the way that she also erupts at it, thinking that she's sort of right in doing that. But my feeling was always, that's exactly the first point at the beginning. Like, the fatter woman goes there and says, you know what, I'm just concerned about my joints, my knees, I'm okay with this. But that is an actual concern. And I was surprised of how they dismissed it as in, oh, it's concern trolling.
Because there's a difference between those two experiences, though. The woman at the beginning is worried about something that she knows probably will happen. And it's a fear that you have, like you're worried about getting joint pains. What the friend does, though, is he over-exaggerates the health issues that Plum has now. He says that, oh, sometimes when you arrive and you're completely drenched in sweat and you're panting, gasping for air, like I'm worried that you're going to have a heart attack. But we're not shown that. At no point in that show does she do that. And so it's clearly a thing that...
It's an exaggeration.
This is how he imagines fat people, and this is what he thinks of her health without knowing anything about it whatsoever.
Fair. I was just surprised that, if we have considered the experience of this woman saying, I'm okay with who I am, I just want to make sure that the infamous health issue that they talk about doesn't happen to me. Which, as you said, I completely understand. I'm completely on the board. I appreciate that if someone else tells that to you, to begin with, regardless of how it's said, it's a punch.
You're not my doctor. You're not my. You don't exist within my body. You don't know how my body feels. It's completely overstepping your bounds as a friend.
I think the way that maybe it's better practically portrayed is when, spoiler alert, in later episodes she joins the terrorist organization, and they openly just tell you, well, this is a demanding performance kind of thing. If we are running away, can you run for 30 minutes?
Yeah, but again, on the other hand, though, that's a fitness, not a health thing.
No, absolutely. But I think put it that way and not put it as, again, a personal responsibility, or you're worrying me or you're anything. No, you've taken a commitment on something. Can you perform this? Because if you can't, I'm not concerned about how you look. I'm not concerned about your health or other things. This is something that is demanded of us. Can you do it? And that was a very down to earth. I don't judge anything else.
Yeah.
But we're required this. Can you do it?
Yeah.
And that was absolutely.
It's that equity versus equality thing, and sometimes one is more appropriate, and sometimes the other one's more appropriate.
Another thing that was very realistic. It's still in the moment. I think the moment that she meets Kitty, even if it's so brief, it sort of emphasizes. And when she goes along saying, "Oh, I don't want to give them a reason to be fat," and if you give them pretty clothes, where's the incentive?
Yeah.
No, it's exactly the Italian point of view. If I give you clothes beyond a size 12, well, then you think that you're entitled to go out and dress yourself in anything than a muumuu or stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think that's why this show is so good, is because it does. There is a character for every kind of criticism that fat people can get. So you have Kitty, who thinks that all people with weight have a problem, and that's a problem that needs to be solved. Her mother is that kind of well-meaning, I love you just as you are. I wish you could see the person that I could see, but at the same time, that's very dismissive.
Yes, it is.
Of the pain. And then you have Verena, who's like, no, you need to do the work to change your perspective of yourself and to fix that problem, which is giving her the responsibility.
Yeah.
And then fair enough, it's like, okay, but can you run from the police for 30 minutes? Because if not, you're going down, and we don't want you to tell them any information about us.
The response that Plum gives to Kitty when they're still in the office and makes a point of, they all have the anxiety about Jennifer. And Kitty was like, oh yeah, it's terrible, it's awful. And Plum was like, well, actually, no, they really like it. Because it makes them feel that even if they don't fit in with their peers, they still matters. They gave me the key on how to read the entire show, because that is exactly the kind of attitude and the kind of view that reading feminist literature before approaching Dietland gave me. And in that context, I understood perfectly why a lot of reviews seem to be against Dietland because, either you talk about fat people, or you talk about feminism, or you talk about terrorism. Sure. Why do you want to mix those things together? While from the beginning, the title scene, if you know the principal kind of like fat studies and feminine literature, which are basically 4 books from the 80s and 90s. One is The Obsession by Kim Chernin. One is Fat is a Feminist Issue. There's one by Susan Border, which I don't remember the title of because it's the only one that I haven't read. And then there's The Beauty Myth by Naomi Wolf, which is a demonstration where we can all go down for the worst. But Beauty Myth at the time was a very good book. And without the context that those give you in how beauty and thinness related to beauty doesn't so much have to do with aesthetics, so much so more into the ideal of how can we make sure that for this time and age women will do what we want them to do. It's a standard of female obedience, and skinniness is a form of that. And once you have this as the foundation, and clearly Martin Oxon had this as a foundation, that's why the things are so much in parallel. And her saying, it's because even if they don't fit in with their peers, there's this general bigger sense that they still matter. And that was, to me, that was exactly the call and the point to the fact of how fat is a feminist issue. And it's not very much talked about, and yet even in those books, Plums and Beauty Myth, but in the other books it's still seen sort of as a personal responsibility to learn to love yourself despite the world, and that is still something that hasn't been quite got over, and it's nice that they do the call to it, making you understand what is the context in which this show makes sense. And I understand without that, it just seems, oh, why do we go from this to terrorists that kill and chop penises?
Yeah, and essentially, like that is the point of the exercise that Plum is going through throughout that day. Like all of this work, all this money that she's spending to be beautiful, and like when she's thin, she'll still have to do that.
Yeah.
Like that's still a burden that will be put on her for what she is trying to achieve at the very least. Like she wants, Marlowe does point out is like, you just want to be valuable to society, and Plum's response is, well, what's wrong with that? To which the point is then, well, is that going to bring you happiness actually? Will you be happier doing this as a thin person as you are now? I suppose that's one thing I was wondering for you when you did lose weight, you still weren't necessarily happy with yourself.
That is true. One of the things that I noticed, though, like one of the things that the books and partially the show tries to go for is, oh, you know what, thin will not solve your problems, and if anything, one of the subconscious reasons why women don't want to be thin is because they wouldn't know how to handle themselves in society, they wouldn't know how to fend off unnecessary attention. It's sort of a fear that they talk about.
That's in lots of my notes for the later shows.
Okay, I've never had the point of fear, but I had a lot of anger.
Yeah.
Like I think the point of fear is really dismissing of the human experience, whether male or female, and I was like, I think there's an absolute right to be angry, especially when you sort of slightly start to experience that sort of thin privilege. And the anger comes from, I'm exactly the same person. If you give me attention now and you didn't before, I have nothing to say to you.
Well, so then I think one of the scenes that stands the most out for me, and I think honestly kind of sums up the point of the entire episode, is when Plum goes to the surgeon and basically to have the consultation, and he does the thing from Nip Tuck that is in that show a lot, where he draws all over where the incision marks are going to be, and they do this really interesting thing. I mean, it's kind of part of the opening credits as well, but you have this interesting thing where Plum has this image in her head of what her body is supposed to be, and you get to see this clear disconnect between what she feels like she should look like and how she actually looks like. And being able to see that person in the mirror. And then there's this interesting moment where kind of reality comes crashing down, where the doctor points out, it's like, oh yeah, you're going to be covered in scars. Like once we remove all the skin, everything's going to be scars everywhere, but at least you'll be thin though. And that is something that, like, really, I think I can relate to as a trans woman then is, there is a certain reality towards achieving those goals and being able to see what you think you should see in the mirror. And there are certain things that you have to accept with that. But I think it was a really powerful image. The fact that she has a chosen name as well for who she thinks that she should be when she gets there. And that ties into the conversation that she's having with her mum and with Verena, where they try to convince her, like, oh, but you're Alicia now. Yeah. And that kind of ties into certain arguments that you get on the trans side, which is like, oh, well, like it's actually a question that they ask in the interview, the assessments, is, oh, have you tried just dressing up as a woman and living life that way? It's like none of that can change the disconnect between the physical external and the internal kind of emotional and mental sense of self.
There is a disproportionate discounting of the parallels in ways that we have seen of still living in the wrong body. And I think one of the reasons why it started to get me so annoyed keeping on hearing the extreme fringes of the healthy at every size that you powerful, you queen, no, you have to accept, oh no, if you don't accept yourself, what does that tell about the way that you see others that are even fatter than you or stuff like that? I'm just like, if all of that was, if we have accepted, and I think most well-read people, or just even people that have a simple empathy can understand most, we're talking about 90%, if not more, of fat people it's not a choice. When you take away the choice, that's where the oppression comes in. You receive a kind of treatment in signifiers that you give that doesn't have anything to do with the person you are.
Yeah, it is all about how society treats you. And so, like, yeah, they have this point of like, oh, well, when you're thin, you're still going to have to do all this to be treated a certain way. And it's like, but if I do all this, that's the point that's hammered home in this, is that the Plum does all this stuff to be treated a particular way by the people around her. But because she's still fat, it doesn't make a difference. Yeah. They still just see the fat underneath it. If she was skinny, all that stuff would just be completely normal and accepted. Yeah. And yeah, that's what a lot of the fat and trans experiences overlap, is just in how other people treat you. Like, if you are just seen as a man in a dress, then society treats men in dresses a very specific way, and there's no escaping with that.
I think it's interesting that basically this was the makeover episode, and all the makeover films or makeover scenes that we see in films, there is a reason why they're never done on fat people, and it's because society doesn't think that that's enough. However, it's a society based on capitalism.
Yeah.
So I think it was a very, and again, it's a thing that is seen in all the feminist and fat studies and literature, and it always brings together that society is wrong, capitalism is wrong, but we still wake up and live in it tomorrow. Yeah. So we have to work within those parameters until we can start a revolution. So that was the main. It was interesting to see that it got to that, and it was problematic to see that Verena and Mauro thought that they were teaching her a positive lesson.
Well, so what Marlo and Verena don't do is acknowledge their own privilege in that situation.
Oh, yeah.
So Marlo has this thing of like, I used to do all this stuff to get my career, and like I got all that career, and now I don't give a shit. It's like, great, because you're rich. You made so much money as an actress and selling books that, yeah, well done. Now you can afford not to do it because you
don't need to. Yeah, Verena is the same thing. Oh, you have skinny privilege. You are the alpha woman of the entire thing. Oh yeah, but that matters sometimes in society, but the point is still down to you to learn to love yourself. If you don't learn to love yourself, how can anybody love you? And that is, again, it's very real, and it's very problematic that is still the idea. It's still down to the fat person to modify the way that they evidently look at their imaginary world, which once again, if you transport it to the trans experience, is exactly the same as telling you, well, you can believe yourself that you're a woman, why do you want society to recognize you as such? It's down to you to accept yourself. And that is bullshit.
You got to do both. You got to be... The thing, you need to be accepted by society first, so that every time that you try to make an attempt to accept yourself, it's not completely undone by some random...
It's not just broken down, reminding you that all the ways that you look tell me that you're not a person that is worth of dignity or respect.
Yeah. Okay, so next up then we have Shrill, which is a show that you put on in the background a lot, and I've not particularly paid attention to, because when I have looked at it, I've always thought this has been quite terrible representation of fat existence, namely just because the protagonist seems to be written as a very terrible person.
I think one of the issues with Shrill, we considered an episode of the third season, and I knew from the beginning that something was off. However, and I must confess to this, and it doesn't look like she has openly self-esteem issues, but the way that she allowed people to treat her, especially her boyfriend, really reminded me of how I let people treat myself in my early 20s. I cannot fathom necessarily the reason for any, but I know that for me, the doubling down of if someone likes you, you hang on to that because it's unnatural. People will not like you. It's the main reason that it's the main thing that my first boyfriend kept on telling me, because I've accepted looking past it, but people won't. So you're lucky to have me.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting way to go along 4 years with someone that basically raped you, but. I understood that thing. I was like, why does she keep going back to this shithead that hides her from friends, make her go away from the back door, and it's enough?
Yeah, so that's the thing about writing characters as well, is that you need protagonists to be flawed.
Yes.
at the beginning. But at the same time, there needs to be some kind of development there. And the one thing that I've been wondering, because this episode is from the 3rd season.
So there should have been growth.
What is the development here? Because so in this episode, then she's just written an article that's massively popular, where she calls out stomach stapling doctor, so very similar to the previous episode of Dietland.
Yeah.
And said that it's not her job to.
So she does this article and she just calls out and basically insults in very clever and very poetic and very language-knowing way this doctor. She even says, "Oh, but it's not my responsibility to teach you how to treat fat people with dignity." And I think that reveals that she has grown in a sense, and I hope that by the end we realize that even the writers realize she's not grown in the right sense, because the way that she has grown is by praise. So you can't have popularity based on the standard of high school, like of beauty and stuff like that. She focused that, like she's still really nice in her style and everything, but then she cultivates her skills in writing and in being a journalist more than anything, which I understand. It's something very common. Fat girls do that. I don't have that. I will have so much more time spent in developing my talents and my skills. I think humor is my thing for me. I've developed my comedy because of that. And the praise becomes some sort, in her case, becomes some sort of addiction. Like she doesn't, at that point she doesn't care. And I think it shows in this article, and it shows even more in the article that I think she writes by the end, which her point is, I have to do something unprecedented that nobody has done, that seems so clever, that must sound so clever. And when she push it to the extreme, she does that in trying not to write just a negative article about white supremacists.
Yeah.
Living with a black friend that rightfully that gets pissed off. It's like, it's not just getting the praise out of something special or unique that is worthy. You have a responsibility when you're talking to an audience and not condemning 101% something like that. It's shitty behavior. And when she does it with the doctor, she's like, oh, it's not my responsibility to teach people. And that's exactly the issue. The growth should have been, now that you have an audience that you can talk to, you can teach.
Yeah.
And I know that the responsibility should never be down on the people oppressed to teach other people.
It's just the responsibility of someone with a platform.
Exactly. So if you have an audience, then you can. And if you just do it for the praise itself, that's why...
You're on a pedestal, not on a platform.
That's why she's doing it for selfish reason, and I think by the end of the season, it turns against her.
Yeah. But I think it's an interesting point that when she's in this room where everyone is praising her, you have then her ex's friends basically just like calling her out for being a heartless bitch. And these two things are put next to each other. And it's... I didn't understand, like, why does she have that? What did it serve to have these men then basically shouting at her that she's heartless and she's cruel? Because she didn't learn from it. She doesn't feel sorry for what she's done to him at any point. It just seems to be as if the writers wanted to undercut this praise with some criticism that she doesn't care about, so it kind of also makes her look it does make her look heartless, because they're saying, like, how could you do such a thing? She's like...
I mean, I think in the concept of knowing how this boyfriend treated her, it's very easy to see that as the society is still trying to oppress you. I don't know if it's intentional to try and make the entire show more multifaceted, because things are not completely black or white, while in real life, while on TV they need to be very clean cut, because it's how you progress a story. So maybe in that sense it tries to be more complex. You need to see the entire season to understand that maybe it's not going full circle the right way. Maybe we weren't agreeing with her being praised even at the beginning, but you wouldn't have had the understanding until you get to the end.
But then you get what happens later on in this episode, which is that she's set up on a blind date.
Yes.
And so this is how I see it, is that you have this criticism of her as a partner, essentially, that precedes then how she behaves during this date. Her best friend sets her up with this guy. He said, he's absolutely perfect for you. You're both going to love each other. It's going to be amazing. And she gets all dolled up, goes into this restaurant, sees the guy who happens to be overweight as well, and just like the look of horror on her face in that moment. And again, it's like this plays out where, so the guy gets different treatments for being fat. So you kind of get the sense of like, you know, maybe to a certain extent the audience is on board. It's like, oh, she's just being set up with a fat person, da da da. But then he's immediately diffused because he gets up and he's clumsy and he trips over it, and he's super sweet and apologetic and really kind and portrayed kind of almost naive, but not as a terrible person. And then how she behaves is just cold. Just ice cold.
No, my main issue with this, especially watching it after Dietland, was we literally see both scenes played on the other way. And whereas Plum goes to the dates, and one guy doesn't show up, the other guy lives in the middle of the dinner because sorry, I'm not one of those nice ones, and it's literally just based on her looks. And he gets to the restaurant, see this guy, just goes assuming that it's because he's fat as well. Do the very shitty, absolutely unnecessary, goes to the bathroom to bad-mouth him to her friend, actually says the wrong text, and it's exactly, she behaves exactly in the way that she would have expected someone to treat her as a fat person. And that reminded me, in these situations there are two kinds of people, and that's why Annie here hasn't grown yet. You either know that something bad can happen to you and want others to avoid it, or because you've gone through it, you expect that to legitimize their existence, people have to go through it as well. Yeah. So either you fight for people not to be oppressed or to have the same oppression at least that you had, because you went through it, so everybody has to experience it. And whereas Plum is at the receiving end of this, and he decides awarely, I've been at the receiving end of this, and I'll do this because so. And the worst part of it is because she thinks that in her mind that there is a value to fatness, and she thinks she deserves better because at that point she has the eye on the skinny guy. Yeah.
But this is the thing, again, is that...
If I've ever seen internalized fat phobia.
Yeah, but at this point, 3 seasons into this show, what is that saying? What lesson did she even learn from that? She just did it, got annoyed, went home, and just started hanging out with a skinny guy. Like, it takes, 3 more episodes for that guy to return and for her to realise that she made a mistake?
The only thing that I can think of is actually season 3 was on the last season, and because it ended problematically for both Annie and her roommate, then maybe we've gone to the point that, we thought that we had grown, but actually there was only vanity, so how do we actually grow? Yeah. That's the only thing that I can hope for, because I don't think that it's unaware in the minds of the writers, because it seemed very obvious.
Yeah, there's something going... Again, I think there's something going on in that Annie and Will were just written so completely differently. And like, that's the thing, you have Annie who is behaving evil, essentially. And they do all this writing... It's interesting, they do all this writing for Will to make him as lovable as possible, essentially, so that when she accidentally texts him that she's on the worst date of her life, like, it really cuts through and you genuinely feel sorry for him. And it's almost like they think that we wouldn't have felt sorry for him, that we would have just laughed at him. And it's like, I don't understand what the writer's actual opinions on any of these matters really are. Yeah. Because none of it plays out. And like, okay, fine. She meets back up with Will later on and they have a conversation. She realizes that she was wrong, but there still isn't consequence. She doesn't... All she learns is that Will is actually a nice guy. She doesn't learn that essentially she was a bitch.
No, I guess when they actually then meet each other again and sort of get together, the idea is, see, I've gone past my prejudice based on looks. But it's just... It's painful because, again, there are choices.
And Nick has already rejected her.
Of course.
Exactly. So now she doesn't have the skinny option. Now, which again is like, it's frustrating.
The main issue for me is, as a fat girl, everybody has experienced this, that you're rejected just because of how you look. I was told, I think I was 10, and it was a summer camp, and there was this guy that we spent all time together, like we went pine cone hunting together and all of that. So we were already sort of in the concept of 10 years old together. But I remember asking me, oh, if I were skinnier and I were to ask you to be officially together, which again, for 10 years old is let's hold hands in public, would you? And he was like, oh yeah, absolutely. And literally my next question was, what if I asked you now? And he was like, oh no, of course not.
Yeah.
So, because we know we've gone through that, I don't understand how we could awarely put someone else through it.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the choice then of characters, and that's the difference, I guess, between where Plum is, or I don't know, maybe Plum is written to be already in her 30s, so she's gone through that stuff and she doesn't have to impose it on other people. I don't know. I was really surprised.
It doesn't even feel like parallel storylines of like you have this success of Plum where she's doing amazing things and she is changing society, because the episode is filled with like people's comments about how much like they really took it on board, and even the Doctor listens to her criticism and changes her policy. So she is making the societal change. And then this other thing, which is that, but she's a bitch. And they don't even seem to be parallels. They're just two threads going completely off in each other that at some point need to resolve.
I have the bad suspicion that Annie might be written the way she is, in a sense of, in spite of her figure, in spite of her weight. Let's ignore that. What would a standard 20-year-old girl would behave like? And then I understand more. And I guess it's a sense to normalize, oh, the fat girls are just normal girls. Which is true, but it's impressive to me that the way to normalize it to normal 20-something is let's do also the bitchy things, because if there's one value that actually it's given to marginalized people, is that through suffering, it's really bad, but through suffering you have learned something about how not to perpetrate that, and the fact that it misses a crucial part of value of being fat. There is a value in that, and it's in empathy, in kindness, and to make her a normal 20-year-old. Oh, what would a normal 20-year-old do if she didn't have the stigma of fatness? Just normal shitty stuff. And I appreciate that might be true, but I also appreciate it's the one, but there are probably others, but the one that stands out to me is the level of empathy that being fat gives you, is how much it makes you work on things and to understand others. So taking away that empathy, which is one of the good things, it seems really pointless.
Yeah.
To get sort of, not quite seamlessly, but there is a connection that I sort of have a feeling for between Annie and Kat in Euphoria, because of their sort of dependency on popularity, on appreciation. For Annie is the praise for her articles, for Kat it becomes the praise and appreciation of men, where she would think that being fat she couldn't be liked.
Yeah, so you get this interesting point in this episode where it starts as each Euphoria episode does with a kind of a backstory for the character that we're going to focus on, or at least the B plot is going to focus on. It's a bit different to Skins. You still get like the main A plot of Jules and Rue throughout every episode, but there's always a B plot that focuses on one other character. And so starting off with this one, you get the story of Kat when she was a kid who was still a bit slightly chubby kid, but at the very least like she wasn't bullied for her weight.
Yeah.
Like she had no issue. She kind of had a boyfriend, like you said, she had someone who would hold her hand when they were 10. And then she goes on holiday and she gets hurt by a jellyfish and ends up drinking 70 virgin pina coladas and puts on 20 pounds, which for a 10-year-old is it's a lot. And then a friend rejects her. But then the interesting point is it goes into, at least this does work as a setup for what happens in this episode, or has been happening so far. But she does get that online praise originally, that notoriety, that popularity as a fanfic writer. Yeah. Which is a bit of a cliche in that, like, for this generation, if you're a bit nerdy or you're a bit unpopular, then Tumblr and fanfic is where you go to kind of, everyone reinforces each other. But at this point in the show, what we've seen of Kat is that she's quite stylish. She has popular friends. Yeah. She's with the most popular girls in the group. They don't particularly treat her badly.
I thought that when in the previous episodes she just sort of has sex with a guy on a dare, and that's how she gets sort of the revenge porn. I don't think it was revenge, but it was the taping of that gets to Pornhub or the equivalent in the show. And I think it's because in some situations, it's not that they treat her better, you're very right, they treat her bad, but she sort of feels like she doesn't fit, probably for what they talk about sex, they have boyfriends and all of that, and she doesn't. So I think it is something that she doesn't adhere to sort of feel on level with her friends, not because they bully her for that, but just because she doesn't want to feel inferior in some ways.
Yeah, but I think there's a point that, you know, she has a sexuality to her. In the episode where she does lose her virginity, like, she is desirable to these guys. They might only be seeing her as a sex object, but honestly, I think in the kind of scenario that they're in, it could have been any female character could have been in that position.
It is.
And it would have been exactly the same.
It is true in the sense that yes, anybody of any character could have been there. I think the pressure in feeling sexual, it's the representation of one of the most common things the fat girl go through. It's the duplicit at the same time. Oh, you're fat, so you're not beautiful enough to be desired. Therefore, you need to be available for sexual favors because nobody would want you.
Yeah, and that's definitely the trope that plays out, even if it isn't explicitly written to kind of show that. It just happens to be how the writers decided to have her go through that.
I think maybe T was talking about it. I think it wasn't in the Fat Friend. Was it in the Fat Friend video? Either the Fat Friend or the Skinny propaganda video. And T Noir talks about it, and she's surprised that she didn't realize that all it took was a corset for even me to like her more. And I think it's part of the concept of the one way to go and be more appreciated for fat girls is to still adhere to standard beauty standard, which is hyper-femininization and hyper-sexualization.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It does. That's the interesting thing about this episode. It does a pretty good job of justifying how Kat gets to where she does. So you have this like approval that she gets from her fanfic admirers, and that has this sexuality to it. There's the revenge porn that originally she's very ashamed of, mostly because her body is exposed. Like, she's ashamed of her body in that video. And then she sees the approval of the guys who are commenting on it and how much they like it, and that's what then makes her want to go into that, to get that praise and to build that confidence of herself through her sexuality.
However, the idea of control.
Yeah, however, they do this at exactly the same time as Jules doing the same thing. These plots run very parallel to each other. So you have Kat's thing where she's dressing up in lingerie and making kind of like low-res videos of her booty shaking and taking pictures of her toes. And she has this video call with this guy that it seems really seedy and sort of dangerous and threatening at first. Like, she's so nervous about it, and the guy's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna warn you, kitten. I'm a bit of an odd duck." And it's like, "Oh God, what's he gonna make her do?" And then that situation is like immediately diffused, where he gets up and he has a tiny penis and he's into being shamed about that, and she laughs and we laugh, and it becomes like this awkward but quite funny situation. With Jules, you have the first episode where it explores her sexuality, and it talks later on about how she does these things because it's her way of conquering femininity, and that's a whole thing that needs to be unpacked in its own discussion. But everything that Jules does is kind of immediately threatening and dangerous.
Yes.
So like, she meets this guy and it's like, this is fucked up. The fact that she's a 17-year-old meeting with guys in motel rooms, like, this is fucked up. And like, she does, and
it makes you worried for her.
Yeah, but then when it comes to like making the nudes and stuff, so she gets Rue to help her take some like artful semi-nude pictures, and the consequences of that is that later those pictures, spoiler again, those pictures get used to blackmail her, and everything Rue does with her sexuality is like danger, 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 bad, child porn, whatever. This doesn't happen to Kat. Kat is basically reinforced by the plot line. There, apart from like one slightly iffy situation that she gets in with an online interaction.
I think Kat realizes that this is a way to take control over things, and that's sort of, for most of the time protects her until I think because she doesn't consider at some point she thinks that because she has some sort of control, which I think is through money and through anonymity, like she goes through a lot of lengths to make sure that even the money that she receives is anonymous and all of that, and Jules doesn't have these barriers on because it has to be not about what she portrays but what she is, because that's the point of if conquering femininity for her is because she is a woman, so it couldn't deliver the same satisfaction to her if it wasn't about her. While for Kat is just I think she sort of sees the two things as different, as in herself with her friends and how she dresses with her friends, and then with this sort of porn star that she created that is appreciated for her body, and she can distance herself from her body until then she brings the things clashing together, and when she decided to just take a bit of this control into real life with the change of wardrobe.
So yeah, this is the thing. What you get is that Kat's sexuality is immediately commodified.
Yes.
As in, all her sexuality is good for her is for making money, and to be sold then to the men online. That's the only way that it is represented here. And what does she do with the money that she makes? She reinvests it in her sexuality, in this mind-blowing makeover that she does, where she buys a choker, a corset, and puts on some red lipstick.
The makeup is the most of difference, but other than that, I think...
Because this is the way, if you compare it to how Annie and Plum are dressed in these episodes, in their episodes, they're wearing quite loose-fitting clothing that sort of demonstrates the insecurity that they have with their body. It's not saying, oh, this is how fat people need to dress, because kind of Plum goes through her own sort of thing on that as well. But it's just expressing, like, this is what fat people do because they want to cover themselves up. Kat never does this.
No, even before that, I was impressed by how fitted the denim dress when she's at the mall with Maddie is, and I'm like
she's showing off her curves. Exactly. Like she has a body, she knows how to show it.
That's more sporty maybe than the sexual innuendos that we give to like gothy stuff because we think that it's related. Well, people that are not involved in the BDSM community think that it's related to the BDSM community, but it's that perception. But as a silhouette, you're very right, it doesn't change. I think the makeup is the most change, and now she has a side parting instead of a middle parting, and that's it.
And the only thing I can think of that is that it's just a disconnect between, like, if I'm going to be generous to the show, it's a disconnect between the costuming department, which wants this to be like the most
very
sleek, stylish, like everyone's makeup is absolutely incredible all of the goddamn time, and so like Kat would have stood out as not being in that same kind of senseless fashion. It doesn't work for the character developments and this transformation that they make her go through.
It's not enough of a transformation.
Yeah, she goes through the school hallway in this choker and corset and sits down, and this guy who's was interested in her before is still interested in her now. He goes, "Oh, you look different." She goes, "I changed." It's like, wow.
It's a bit... I think one of the things that comparing it to Shriel impressed me the most is that whereas the praise for Annie is sort of made in function of what she does, but she doesn't make anything out of that because again, she doesn't necessarily she doesn't need to change herself, but she doesn't even try to make a change for the world. Like, you've been treated like this by the doctor, why don't you do something so that other people will not have to go through that? No, it's not my job to educate you, it's just my job to denounce you, because when I make a fuss, people praise me for making a fuss without realizing that it doesn't have a long-term effect. Yeah. So Annie likes to destroy other things to make a point of her cleverness, not even being good, but being clever.
Yeah.
I think Kat...
She wants to one-up the system.
Yes. I think Kat sort of goes through this revolution through the praise, but the only one that it's a danger of being damaged is herself. And I think it gets to the point where she suddenly like closes down the computer and everything because she thinks she has all this control, but then because this person was paying her so much, she starts to give in to requests that she's not comfortable with.
Yeah, and that's something that's been in the news a fair amount actually, because over lockdown a lot of women turned to something like OnlyFans in a way to make money when they're out of work. And you get a lot of them will start out thinking, oh, I'm just going to put pictures of my underwear online and that's going to be it. And I'm in control of the content that I share, and that's how it's portrayed. But when the subscriptions start to drop, and like suddenly you get locked into this classical capitalist thing of like, oh, if I don't perform, if I don't meet the standards of the market, then my livelihood is going to be taken away from me, and it just strips away those barriers one by one. But yeah, I don't think the show does a really great job of showing that.
And
because there's the thing, she's rewarded most of the times that she does these barriers. She is rewarded immediately for doing it, and any moment of uncomfortableness that has is again diffused. Like the scene with this guy where she meets on cam for the first time. Like, yeah, she's really nervous about it, and then suddenly the outcome of that is now she's really, really confident because she has power over men. And then if you compare that again with Jules, my point with all this is with the writing is what are the writers trying to say about these characters and their motivations, or what's the development that is happening from what the characters are learning? And you're just getting these two very mixed messages between these two characters. And it's kind of similar to how it is in Shrill.
I mean, I guess that's the point, and it's more justified in this than in Shrill, because these are teenagers.
Yeah.
And there is this
but the message
all
is,
or nothing.
But the message is, if you're a fat teenager, it's okay. Sell your body online.
One of the things that actually I realized when watching that is the issue that happens with her is that the only kind of fans that they give her, they're writing for her, are men who fetishize her.
Yeah.
While the one guy that doesn't fetishize her and liked her even before, it's the guy from school that, because she's that over-sexualized, of course she still likes it when she is at the Halloween party with the nun costume, like of course. It is all eyes for her, but it was before as well, and that's always been my not my fear, but one of the things that I consider when we considered opening OnlyFans, and I was like, I just genuinely assumed that because most of what is porn is consumed by people hidden in the shade, in the shadows, because I mean it is data that you found that not by chance, the websites with the most search for interracial sex or porn with transgender people are the states in the US that are the most conservative. I don't remember who was found with a screenshot of porn while he was actually talking about it's so terrible that we even consider transgender people existing, but he was watching transgender porn.
I think that was in the How to Congress as well.
So I genuinely always assumed, you know what, that's the audience for that kind of thing, and if you do an OnlyFans, the only consolation is we do this to take money out of the hands of people who would otherwise use it for actually in everyday world being against fat people, transgender people, and all of that. And I don't think now that that's necessarily the case. Like I remember when I asked you before, and I told you before, and I was like, if we have to just do stuff for them, well, I'm just happy to take the money out of them. And that, I know that it gave me some idea of control, at least on the bad people of the world. And then you made me realize it doesn't have to be like that. Like there is a chance that we can just talk to our peers. And so the kind of soft and queerness experience, even slightly on the OnlyFans pornographic way, it doesn't have to be just consumed as a fetish. And I never considered that, and it bugs me that because it's a possibility, the writers didn't make Kat consider that. Like you don't have to just sell yourself to someone that potentially in the street would just throw food at you, but actually secretly covets you. It doesn't have to be only that way.
But I think what was essentially revealed though by the cam session that she has is that the guy who's after her the guy in this episode at least, is also fat. So there is that kind of that sense that you get from Shrill that only two fat people should date. Well, at least the conflict that exists there. You get that here of like, we aren't shown the people online who are actually into her. The only one we are shown is someone who's fat as well. So we don't know what everyone who's commenting could just be a fat person. We don't know if it's a fat phobic fetishist.
It's I don't know, it feels problematic that's all the audience that they give her, when it doesn't have to be that way, especially when it's not just Pornhub now, it's every day in OnlyFans, and the stories that you hear. I don't know, there is a natural hatred, and it usually comes from men, and I think because men have an issue with the idea of consent, which is also manifested in the way of paying for porn rather than just getting it other ways. And so if there's not a bit of abuse, there's not enough satisfaction in it. So that's an issue for men that I wouldn't know how to unpack.
Maybe.
If you're a man and you don't feel like this, please do let us know, because that would be a first for me. It would be interesting to learn that no, consent is sexy for some men as well.
The next one, BoJack Horseman, I think might actually be the most interesting one to me. Because, so at this point in the show, Diane has been trying to write a book, kind of spiraled in her mental health, and has started taking antidepressants. And there's a moment where she's like, oh no, if I go on antidepressants, I'll turn into a zombie, I'll gain lots of weight, and you won't want to be with me anymore. Yeah. But actually her boyfriend is, I think probably for the first time in her life, genuinely cares about her and is supportive. So yeah, he convinces her, no, you absolutely should, it's going to be fine. And we get this, well, it opens up with a montage then. Diane is now fat, but it just shows like how much better she's doing.
How much more she seems to be able to do it all in life, and how she proactively finds solutions to things. I think one of the things that obsessed me the most about the storyline of Diane going fat is the way that most of the fans of BoJack have taken it.
Well, yeah, we'll get to the audience later.
But I would like to know, how people remember this, because from here till the end now, Diane is going to be this size.
Yeah. And can you think of a single moment from when it changes to her being fat that her weight is commented on? Actually, there's one moment, which is when she's in a dressing room trying to get new clothes, and she asks, oh, do you have this in a size? And the two cashiers just completely ignore her, and they turn and say, oh, why do you want to put a number on your body?
It's like it's the one time that it's commented, it's not commented in the negative way that you would expect, or it's a joke, and it's still not useful because they can't find the size that fits her. But
yeah, and instead what you have is this episode where I guess, you said with the audience, everyone expected it to be about being fat, but no, this episode is just about depression. And in a sense, the reason why I find this interesting is because you have this is the only one out of these four where you have a fat character that nothing about this is about her fatness. And while the episode does tackle a lot of the issues that fat people face, and certainly like weight issues are tied to depression in a lot of ways, and depression can make it very difficult to manage your weight, none of these issues of depression are about her weight at all. Yeah. It's about her career, it's about who she wants to be as a person. But I think, so something you were mentioning earlier about the value of fatness, and kind of the risk then that can come from having that taken away. And that's something that really is covered in this episode, because she gets, again, you have this thing where like the depression is kind of solved, she's happy, she's proactive, but she still can't write her book.
Yeah.
And there's this moment where she decides basically to go off of her meds because, oh, this is a negative book, I need to get back to my place of pain. And Guy, her boyfriend, even points out, is like, yeah, but you couldn't write the book before.
Yeah.
If you can't write the book now, maybe you just don't want to write this book. And you get this sense, and it becomes explicit, that Diane is actually just attached to her pain. And she doesn't want to give up her pain or depression because, basically the way she says it later is, well, what if my pain wasn't good pain? What if it didn't help me grow? What if it's just something bad that happened to me? And now it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
And it's a question of like, well, who are you then without the pain? Because it's useful to use as an excuse. If you have depression, you can go, oh, I'm depressed, so solving these problems in my life are going to be really hard. And that can be comforting in a sense. It's like a friend who's constantly with you. Because if you remove that, there is this fear of like, what if I'm just bad?
Well, yeah, it's I completely get it. some of the feminist literature puts this same pattern on the supposed fear of women to get thin, because what if my life all of a sudden doesn't fix itself? What if it wasn't dependent on my size? Then actually the responsibility has to be on me, which seems to be a thing, a possibility, because I accidentally have gone through the experience of being not thin but thinner, and then this. No, I didn't expect it to solve on my life then. I know that my size didn't have to do with that, but I appreciate that then it makes you go more into, then what's the problem? Then am I the problem?
But I think the interesting side of that then is once you take away that problem, because that problem, while it is a comforting friend, it's a friend that doesn't have your best interests at heart. So once you remove that influence from your life, does that then allow you to make the changes that you need to do? And I think that's something that, Dietland makes a point of like, you can get skinny, but you're still going to have to put this work in. Yeah. But her point is like, but at least that work will do something. Like, there kind of is almost no point trying to fix your life if you are suffering from depression, because the depression will just continue to eat away at things.
Like that needs taking care of, but by no means taking care of that will solve everything else. That will simply make you more able to then work on the other issue, which by itself can be scary. Like, it just means there's a lot of work.
Yeah, and you kind of get that then with like she has this book idea, which is a memoir about all the terrible things that she's going through, and then she writes the new book, which is about a food court detective, and you can kind of tell that this actually is her secret idealized self. And there's this moment where she's speaking to the character from her book, and she says to her, "It's like, well, I've got just enough vulnerabilities to be likable," and it's like, that's what hammers the point home. And Diane is kind of like, okay, but it makes a point of like, oh, but what if I do that? Then who am I? It's like, well, it doesn't matter who you are. Won't it just be easier? So it is a scary thing. They admit it is a scary thing, but they do make the point of like, no, this is change that needs to happen. This is something that you do need to do. And the character is much better for it. And so interestingly then, being thin has nothing to do with it for her. So she would go more in the category of like the character from the first episode of Dietland.
Yeah.
Of someone's like, I am fat, but that's just on an individual level of like what Diane's issues, I guess, because she was a skinny person.
But it's surprising to me, because before she goes on the meds, she actually, and when she's still thin, it's the first fear that she voiced. Oh, what if, no, if I went on antidepressant when I was a teenager, it would make me gain weight. So before, she thinks that that's a negative thing, but then that is never actually impacted her life in the ways, or in the bad ways, that her sort of writer's block or confusion about what to write is, and it's nothing to do with that.
And it's fair enough, it is an omission of the writers, clearly on purpose, to not have Diane experience any negative actions of gaining weight. Like, they are making a commentary on what they think the idealized version of this character is, and that doesn't gel with reality. But it is also a show about talking animals at the same time, so...
I don't know. In my perception, and again, we're talking about drawings, so I can't necessarily give a size to a drawing, but to me, Diane went to be a very skinny, almost model-like person to overweight.
Yeah.
Like, she's not obese in the bizarre fat sizes scale. She's a small fat.
Yeah, and this is America, where
exactly. Again, so like, she's not necessarily gonna be challenged so much in everyday things. She changed the kind of jacket that she has, but like, it's the kind of thing.
Yeah, and she's an author, so she's like mostly working from home. She's dealing with Princess Carolyn over the phone. There's none of these like expectations that...
Oh, having this beautiful press. Like, she doesn't do a job where her looks are relevant. And yet, I don't remember one time when the storyline of Diane was brought up in the subreddit for BoJack, that someone, or usually more than one person, brings up, oh, it was so disappointing, it was so miseducative that they didn't let her lose the weight by the ending, because it's such a bad message. It's clearly so unhealthy. And again,
it's just what happens when you're on antidepressants.
It makes me also wonder what's the vision that they had about what in popular culture is considered normal now.
Yeah.
Because average-wise, I think Diane just simply went to be average-wise, especially in America. But perception-wise, she's fat now.
Because
and I don't think that the level of fat can be... That is the ultimate level of constant trolling to me, because she doesn't... If I can say anything by someone, by looking at them, which she shouldn't be, but if people do look at her and think, oh, she must be unhealthy because she's fatter, well, in my personal experience of fatness, that is not the fact that has anything to do with health, but it's impressive that that's the first thing that people want to go for. And oh, the authors didn't make her lose weight, that's a very bad message. Not the fact that she was suicidal out without meds, and putting her off meds would bring her back to that. No, it's the fact that she got weight, that is the bad thing.
And you could make a criticism on the show as a whole for its fat representation, in that, yeah, it wouldn't be a fair criticism to say that the only fat people in the show are sea mammals, because they are animal-based shows. So you have like the walrus editor of the magazine. But the way I always see that is more just because, again, their weight is never anything to do with the character. It's just, oh, well, let's put in some sea mammals for fair distribution, and sea mammals have a lot of blubber, so...
In fairness, knowing how much Bojack is into just beautiful and young women, oh no, if you know how old this Scotch he is, if he was 3 years younger than me, I would have stopped sleeping with it. Like, Bojack is more ageist than fanphobic, because when he's interviewed for Vanity Fair, he then spends the night with the manatee. Like, no, the body size, ironically, is never made an issue for. I think the most that we get is when they there's the elephant. It's not B&Q, but their equivalent in the in the US. Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, it's never an issue, and it's impressive that it's so ingrained in the audience and people in general, that no, that had to be an issue for Diane, and the fact that she didn't lose the weight, it was such a bad message. Such a bad message.
So that's, very much the audience's problem, not the show's.
True, but we live in a world where, ironically, the writers are a small elite, not much of an elite, but they're a small number, and as much as they give information and representation, it's a very small number of people compared to the people that walk down the street.
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting point in the episode which almost shows the writer's awareness of their own audience, which is when she needs to cross over the road.
Yes.
But all you see is she goes up to this food stand and she buys a hot dog with like all the toppings and layers and stuff, and then she uses it as bait to get carried over by a seagull, and she lets it go. Like, he goes off with that, so she literally just bought it for him. But yeah, the initial thing is like, oh, now she's fat, then showing how much she's eating. That. And they subvert it that way. But I think the audience didn't really pick up on that.
No, it takes more. It pains me because media representation is important. I'm glad that this representation exists. I'm glad even when the bad representation exists, because at least there's visibility. And it's very much harder not to see someone like you otherwise. Not even justified, not even in a good light, but existing, and it is problematic when there isn't this kind of visibility. But also, if we want to sort of move past, I don't think that people need to look positive per se. It's okay with all the
again, a protagonist should be flawed.
Yes.
Because otherwise, you don't get that character development. You don't go on a journey with them, and that's what we're here to do when we watch TV shows. But at the same time, if they're going to be flawed, there should be character development.
There should be a way to realize that and learn from that and move past that. And I don't see the same way that is done on regular characters, not the fat characters so far.
Yeah, if television shows are just about showing what it's like to be people, then we might as well just do reality TV and follow people around with a camera. Fiction has a point. It has a message. It's for us to learn things. It's for us to explore themes and ideas that we can't necessarily do in real life.
Yeah.
and change the way that we think about things. So yeah, I think it's just important when you see a fat person on a television show, just to ask, like, okay, what is the writer saying about this character? How does the fatness impact the life of this character? How does it impact the personality of this character? And what happens to this character change how you think about fat people?
Yeah, it's. I think one of the last bit that gets into my mind is it's been 32 years since The Little Mermaid was out, and at the time, especially in Italy, it was it was perfectly coded, the fact that the villain had to be fat. And then someone in recent times, more like 5 years ago or something, made me notice on Tumblr, which is where most of the line and thing came from at some point, well, we know that Ursula had all these powers, so she could have chosen to be skinny, but that was an aware choice. And much as as Disney might have chosen that because it was a negative connotation, the people that worked on character development, and it was one of the last things that Howard Ashman did, who was a gay person, they weren't necessarily making her that way for negative coding. It was just the culture that they were immersed in New York in the 80s, and it's not by chance that then Ursula then is inspired by Divine. And it's impressive that throughout these 30 years, I mean, the moment that Ursula started to become appreciated and popular, there was a subculture that started to draw in her thin.
Right.
Like she has supposedly in the Little Mermaid 2, like there was a direct video, she has a sister that is thin. But people, because of the power, the confidence of Ursula, started to be more widely appreciated, not just by the weirdos. They started to draw her thinner and thinner, like almost like a Barbie. And it was impressive to see you're missing the entire point, and still to someone that you appreciate as fat, the first thing that you can think of doing is making it thinner. I do look forward, they've done Cruella, they've done Maleficent, I do look forward them making an Ursula to actually tell the story, not from the eyes of a 16-year-old spoiled princess, but from the point of view of someone. What was happening at the palace before she was banished? What was she banished for? I still don't think that Ariel is the victim here. I still don't. Right, these were our generic blubbering thoughts about these shows and these episodes. If you have watched them, or if you have watched something else and you would like us to take a look at that if we haven't mentioned, or maybe we haven't mentioned it, do let us know in the comments. If you have other opinions on this show specifically, do let us know in the comments as well. We'll go through them and we'll see if there's other stuff that we can watch. We respond to all the comments because we're still in that phase. And by the way, because we're still in that phase, there are also ways that you can support us, because we're still very much at the beginning with this channel, and bridging times help. So if you are good for a one-off donation, there's PayPal. And if you feel like what we do here is relevant for times to come, then there's Patreon, which we have 2 Patreons now. I can't believe. Thank you so much. I couldn't believe it. I was like, really? We have 100 subscribers and 2 Patreons. That's amazing. Thank you. So if you want to join Patreon, that's an amazing way to propel us forward into do more stuff. There's not going to be a video next week, because the first video that is going to be on the 1st of August, because it's going to be the new big video essay, which is
Have You Seen This Unicorn? And yeah, we need the week to film it beforehand.
And then for the month of August, we will do other commentary videos on the themes of Have You Seen This Unicorn? And then ideally that's the timetable. Every 1st of the month there will be a big video essay, and for the 3 weeks to come there will be more discussion about them. Should you have any ideas, any proposals for general concept, leave them in the comments. Who knows? We might be inspired. We might know how to do the research. Some things we don't. I admit. Like, I've been asked things and I'm like, I don't know enough about that. I don't know where to find information about that. I can't. But other things, hey, who knows? Let us know. Bye. The heat. Oh my God, the heat.